What's up guys, I'm Kuma. Today I'm making a more in-depth guide for y'all on the Kinsect Glaive. My first ever video on the Kinsect Glaive during the beta went really well. I received some great feedback, and after beating the main story with this weapon, I feel like I'm ready to give you guys a better updated guide on this weapon. This guide is mainly for mouse and keyboard, but I'll be sure to include controller inputs as well. Here's a table of contents with timestamps in case you just want to skip ahead to whatever it is you want to know. First, we're going to go over a basic rundown of this weapon along with some general settings to change, as well as some keybinds and buttons to make our experience using this weapon much simpler. There's a few changes I made to the keybinds from my last video, so be sure not to skip this section of the guide. I'll add in a diagram during this section to show my keyboard layout for you guys. We'll talk about the individual buffs and what they do, as well as the combination buffs and how they affect your gameplay. As far as I know, there are 4 ways to get these buffs and we'll go over them. Next we'll talk about the Kinsect Fire and how it applies elemental status effects on the monsters you hunt. Then we will talk about ground combat, how your attacks change with your active buffs, your offset attack, as well as the infinite combo you have when you have all 3 buffs active. After we'll talk about vaulting and fighting in the air with and without buffs. I'll also explain wounds and how to take advantage of them. Lastly, I'll go over mounting attacks, barrel bombs, sneak attacks, and the dismounting attack. We'll finish off with an example hunt showcasing what I taught in this guide. Let's begin with the intro. The Kinsect Glaive is a fun and flashy weapon to use. What mainly sets this weapon apart from the rest of the weapons is the aerial combat, as well as having to manage this giant bug that collects buffs for you during the fights. Now before we get into how this weapon works, I want to make this weapon feel as comfortable as possible for you guys on mouse and keyboard and controller. So let's change a few settings, and trust me on this, after a few hunts, your muscle memory will get the hang of these buttons and you'll be thanking me for these settings. Let's change some general settings first. We're starting off with the most important setting for Kinsect Glaive if you are on mouse and keyboard. If you're on controller, you can disregard this. Let me explain Type 2 and Type 1 directional controls. By default, controller Glaive players are on Type 1, while mouse and keyboard players are defaulted to Type 2. Now I'll show you what Type 2 is and explain to you why it's bad. Check this out. So you see me facing the training dummy, and I'm going to vault upward and dash towards him. Now I'm going to be holding my W key to air evade towards the dummy. Cool, it worked just like my brain expected it to work. But watch what happens if I make my hunter face the camera instead of the monster before I vault up. Once I'm airborne, I still expect W to air evade me towards the monster, but instead, W air evades me in the direction that my hunter was facing before I vaulted upward. This is extremely counterintuitive. If I'm facing the camera before I vault upward, I would have to hold down my S key to air evade backwards away from the camera and towards the monster. This makes the Kinsect Glaive gameplay way more complicated than it needs to be. We shouldn't have to worry about which way our hunter is facing before we vault upwards. So open up the options, tab over to controls, and on page 1 near the middle of the options, change the keyboard directional controls from Type 2 to Type 1. Now, when we are airborne, any direction we press on our keyboard is where we will air evade to, regardless of the direction our hunter was facing before they vaulted upward. Awesome. Now that that's out of the way, let's change some other settings. Press start or escape to open up your menus and go over to options. Tab over to camera and go to page 2, and down below where you see camera distance zoom, max this out. This is going to help your awareness. When you're up in the monster's face, you'll want to be able to see as much of what's going on around you as you possibly can. That way you'll be ready to dodge anything. Next, we're going to be disabling auto sheath. Being in full control of when you sheathe your weapon is much better than the game deciding when you put your weapon away. In the option menu, tab over to controls, and near the middle, you'll see the auto sheath is enabled. Just disable it. By default, you sheathe your weapon by pressing down on the left analog stick or the shift key on keyboard. Using a consumable while your weapon is out also sheathes your weapon, which is X on Xbox controller, square on PlayStation, and E on keyboard. This next setting is subjective, but I prefer keeping the minimap fixed instead of rotating. I feel like I get less lost this way, and it's helped me memorize the layout of the map a lot easier. In the options menu, in the page 1 of the game settings tab, go to the bottom where you see minimap rotation and change that from rotating to fixed. Lastly, for controller players, go to page 2 of the controls tab, and in the middle where you see aim focus mode controls, change the melee weapons one from activate mode to toggle mode. In the upcoming sections of the guide, you'll see why I believe toggle is the superior choice for the Insect Glaive. Now that we are done with general settings, let's get into specific keybinds for our weapon. Some of these changes might seem strange to you guys, but I promise there's a method to my madness. Press start or escape to open up your menus, and instead of going into options, go into keyboard configuration. Create a new profile and select the Insect Glaive. The very first change we will do is totally up to you and personal preference. I don't enjoy having to hold down buttons while pressing other buttons simultaneously, so I changed my dash and sheath weapon from the hold version to the press once version. This way I just have to tap my shift key whenever I want to sprint. Again, everyone plays differently and this keybind isn't much of a big deal. Scroll down and disable the switch NPC target lobby camp right key. I never used this at all during my playthrough, and I believe the R key will be useful for us as a different button. Scroll down and disable simultaneous action on mouse button 4. This button is huge for us and it's much more useful somewhere else. Our simultaneous action with left click and right click is our dismounting attack, which I'll go over in the extra section of the guide. Now, as for our guard special weapon action, you can see it's set to the R key by default. We're going to change this and let me explain why. As an Insect Glaive player, we are pretty reliant on our mobility. As you can see with the on-screen keyboard overlay, I'm using W, A, S, and D to run around and keep a nice fluid movement going. I keep this movement going with my index, middle, and ring finger. Now having to bring this reticle up with the R key means that my index finger is preoccupied on another button, and suddenly, it's way more awkward for my other two fingers to keep the fluid movement going. If there was an option to set this to a toggle, I could quickly reach over and tap R to bring up the reticle, and not hinder my movement as much. But I have a better idea on what to change this keybind to. In the keyboard configurations for the Insect Glaive, change the guard special weapon action from R to mouse button 5. You can see we have a red exclamation point indicating conflicting keybinds, so let's scroll down and disable the hold focus mode. Save, and now check out how much easier it is to keep this fluid movement going with one hand, while leaving your other hand to be in control of the reticle button. Now, as Kinsect Glaive players have two reticles to worry about, the Kinsect aim reticle and the focus mode reticle. I believe that having them both on the mouse hand makes our gameplay feel much easier so that we have less buttons to interrupt our movement. Back in the configuration settings, change the focus mode press once button from Alt to mouse button 4. Again, I'll be explaining why toggle makes our weapon feel better to use as we learn more about its abilities. As for now, look how much easier it is to run around and switch between reticles without scuffing our movement. As you can see, we also have a few simultaneous actions that don't have a keybind. Look at the one that says RT plus A. That is our vaulting ability to go up in the air. So in order to vault normally, you would have to bring up your Kinsect reticle and press your spacebar. That isn't too complicated, but we can make this super easy by just pressing one button instead of two. There will be instances where we know a ground dodge won't get us out of danger, but vaulting upward could potentially save us. And reacting with just the press of one button rather than two is much quicker. For the simultaneous action, I've set it to the V key. My spacebar is in charge of dodging, and V is an easy key to press the vault, and I'm either dodging on the ground or dodging upwards. There won't ever be an instance where my thumb has to press both buttons at the same time. So keeping my thumb in control of my dodges works really well for me, and I think it will work really well for you guys too. But we have a conflicting keybind. The button we need to change isn't used as much. Scroll down to the keyboard shortcut controls and change the display keyboard shortcut from V to the Alt key we disabled earlier. If you don't use your radial wheel, you can now just tap Alt to bring up your items and consumables, and then press the corresponding keybind to use that item. Once you have those buttons memorized, you don't even have to press Alt anymore. If your potions are set to the 1 key, just tap 1 and you'll use that consumable. Finally, our last keybind change. This one is a big change from my previous video, and I'll explain why I changed this button halfway through my playthrough of the story. Our focus strike button is set to shift. It's an easy to reach button with our pinky. However, I believe that having this on shift can be a little problematic for us when playing with focus mode on toggle. You see, although I never did fail a mission during the story mode, I did die a couple of times because of focus strike. There would be moments where I'd be in a panic, and the monster I was fighting at the time would begin winding up a powerful attack that I knew would kill me if it hit. My priority was to press shift to sheathe my weapon and get out of harm's way. Now in moments of panic, I lose track if I'm toggled into focus mode, and pressing the shift key did not sheathe my weapon, but instead, I just stood there like an idiot focus striking the air while the monster got an easy kill on me. This is probably the one downside of focus mode on toggle, but I promise you there are benefits to it that outweigh this situation. So remember that R key we disabled earlier? I experimented a little and got used to this being my focus strike button instead. That way, while in focus mode, any accidental press of the shift key won't cause me to be stuck in an attack animation. If I'm in a panic and my shift isn't sheathing my weapon, I know I just have to quickly toggle focus mode off, and then shift will allow me to run for safety. No more accidents. And here's the diagram I promised with all my button changes. And that's it for all the settings. Now we can begin learning how this weapon works. Now let's talk about buffs and how to collect them. Firstly, that big bug on our wrist is our homie, and it's going to be harvesting extracts for us. Before I go over the different methods to collect the extracts, let's talk about what each one does. The red extract allows you to use charge attacks. The white extract increases our movement speed and jump height. Here's an example of me jumping over the training dummy without the white extract. And now look how much higher I jump over it while having the white extract. The orange extract negates knockback when our weapon is drawn. I'm going to change the training dummy settings from standby to smash mode and give it a weak knockback effect. Now without the orange extract, look how I get knocked down. And with the orange extract, I can take the hit and not be knocked down. However, I am still taking damage. Do note that if your weapon is sheathed, you will still be knocked down regardless if you have the orange extract or not. Now this buff only works with weak knockback attacks. Normal and strong moves will still send your character flying. The green extract isn't a persistent buff like the other three, but instead it recovers health. Let's take some damage real quick from the training dummy and I'll show you. Now that I've lost some health, I'll go over to the training dummy and collect a green extract. When I recall my Kinsect back to me, you can see that I've recovered some health. Now, you can also send your Kinsect to get the green extract twice, and then recall it to get even more healing. Now different combinations of these extracts further enhance your hunter. Red and white increases your attack, white and orange increases your defense. Red, white, and orange further increases and enhances your attacks while also reduces wind pressure, tremors, and roars. Now that we are done talking about the buffs our Kinsect can get for us, let's talk about how we actually go about gathering the extracts. As far as I know, there are only 4 ways to collect the buffs. First, we can activate our Kinsect reticle and hover over different parts of the monster's body to see what buff we are going to get. We made this button our mouse button 5, but for controller players it's right trigger on Xbox and R2 on PlayStation. Once we see the extract we want, we send our Kinsect out with left click and recall it with right click. Y or triangle to send it out, B or circle to recall. When using this method, you can also choose to harvest 2 different extracts before recalling. I'm unsure if the Kinsects in the late game allow you to harvest more than 2 with this method. Generally, the red extract is usually given to us from the head of the monster, the orange from the main body, and the white from the legs. This isn't a golden rule that works 100% of the time, as I've seen some monsters that have different colored extracts at different parts of the body. This harvest method can also be done while mounted. Initially, our reticle won't show up if we hold down our reticle button while mounted. However, you can still send out your Kinsect with taps of the left click or holding down the left click. After your hunter starts swinging, you can see the reticle if you hold down the button. Do note that the range of sending out the Kinsect while mounted is drastically reduced. You need to be a close distance from the monster. The second method can get you all 3 extracts at once, but requires some good positioning. Using the same method we just talked about, we are going to hold down the button to send our Kinsect out instead. You'll notice our weapon begins to glow, indicating a charge. Once fully charged, you can release the button to send the Kinsect out with a more powerful attack that sends the Kinsect through the entire monster. When using this method, the Kinsect icon on the top left opens up its wings, and now you have room to collect 3 buffs at once before recalling the Kinsect. The third method is my favorite way to gather extracts. Activate focus mode and begin to basic attack the monster. We keybinded our focus mode to mouse button 4, then we just beat up the monster with left click to begin gathering extracts. Just like in the other two methods, different parts of the body will give us different extracts. So don't just spam attack the same area thinking you'll get all 3 buffs. For controller players, you activate focus mode with left trigger or L2, and then attack with Y or triangle. I'm not a fan of having to hold a button down while I mash other buttons, so this is one of the reasons why I set focus mode to toggle, less buttons to worry about. More reasonings behind toggled focus mode will be discussed later in the guide. The last method to gather all 3 buffs at once is probably the easiest. It guarantees you to get all 3 buffs with the press of one button. The only catch is that the monster has to have a wound for us to attack. Our focus strike can only be used while we are in focus mode. When we are toggled into focus mode, we can see all the wounds on our target. We just have to get somewhat close to the wound and press our focus strike key in order to extract all 3 buffs. Remember, we keybinded our focus strike to R. On controller, after toggling on focus mode, you press the right bumper or R1 to execute a focus strike. Using focus strike on a part of the body that doesn't have a wound will not get you any extracts, and instead it'll give you a mediocre attack that doesn't do too much damage. So again, only use this on wounds. Now besides getting buffs for us, our Kinsect can also go on the offensive. We have an ability called Kinsect Fire. We bring up our Kinsect reticle and fire a Kinsect at the training dummy. This causes our Kinsect to continuously deal damage to the monster for a short period of time, and it also leaves a colored mist around the spot we shot at. These mists have different effects depending on their colors, and to trigger them we just need to go up to the area where the mist is and attack the monster there. A purple mist builds up poison, yellow builds up paralysis, orange builds up blast, and green slightly recovers your health. Now if you're playing co-op, I believe other hunters can proc these mists of yours, including the healing one so they can be healed. I haven't tried co-op yet, so I can't confirm that one. If you're an Insect Glaive Pro watching this video, let me know in the comments below if our Kinsect Fire can also heal others. Going forward in this video, anytime I say left click, you can assume it means Y or triangle on the controller, and if I say right click, it means B or circle. If there is any instance where this is not the case, I will let you guys know. Now we get into the fun stuff. The basic combo the training arena shows us is the rising slash combo into reaping slash, followed by double slash, and then finished with overhead smash. On PC, it's just 3 left clicks and then a right click. I also want to add that the second left click of this combo, the reaping slash, can also be used while pressing a movement direction in order to become sidestep slash. You can still execute the combo while using the movement version if you need to make adjustments to your positioning mid-combo. Alternatively, pressing the S key to move backwards plus right click executes a dodging slash. You can't finish the combo this way, but it's a great way to get out of trouble if you realize you can't commit to the full combo. As you can see, we're pretty limited to our attacks until we start collecting our buffs. When we have red buff, we get access to the descending slash, which is executed by holding down right click. Once fully charged, we let go of the button to unleash a devastating series of slashes. Now let me show you what happens when we have all 3 extracts. Our basic combo now becomes way stronger. Not only do our attacks have the strong prefix in their name, but they unleash even more slashes during the combo. Now this combo can be input over and over, but the final slash of the combo, called the tornado slash now instead of the overhead smash, actually moves our hunter quite a distance. We move too much while executing this combo to be able to spam it repeatedly. What if I told you there was a way to do an infinite combo that doesn't drastically reposition your character, and you can just stay in place getting free damage on the monster? I heard about the infinite combo back in World, so let me show you how it's done. Once you have all 3 extracts, you're only going to do a 3-button combo rather than the 4 the training area tells you to do. Start with a strong rising slash combo into a strong reaping slash, and instead of going for the strong double slash, you will do a strong wide sweep instead. This means 2 left clicks into a right click. Repeat this simple 3-button combo as long as you still have all 3 extracts and you can keep it going non-stop. Of course, a monster isn't just going to let you do this for free. This is something that can be used when the monster is stunned, knocked down, or in a trap of some sort. I forgot to mention that anytime during this combo, you can hold down the right click to begin charging your descending slash, so if the monster is getting up and about to move, you can finish your infinite with a fully charged descending slash. Now for our strongest attack, the rising spiral slash, this one has 2 requirements in order to pull off. First, you need to have all 3 extracts. Secondly, this can only be executed after a fully charged descending slash. With these 2 requirements met, all you have to do is press your focus mode button and your right click at the same time. But since we have focus mode toggled on, we only need to right click rather than press 2 buttons. Be aware that using the rising spiral slash will consume all of our buffs and we will no longer have them anymore after the attack. So, in a majority of my fights, I'm gathering extracts with the third method we talked about earlier. Having focus mode toggled on, you can still do your strong combo and the infinite while gathering extracts. And now, with the rising spiral slash, if our focus mode is toggled on, all we have to do is press our one other input to execute the move. The Kinsect Glaive involves a lot of buttons combined with the focus mode button, so why worry about having to hold down an extra button while trying to execute other moves? There's still another benefit to the toggle as well that we'll talk about later in this guide. Now here's another combo that requires all 3 buffs, and according to the training area, it's a powerful combo. You begin with a forward right click into a regular right click, and as soon as the animation begins for this move, you can instantly start holding down your right click to begin charging. Then you let go to execute a fully charged descending slash, and now assuming your focus mode is toggled on, finish with a right click to do a rising spiral slash. If it's not toggled, press your focus mode button plus right click. Now the strongest combo that I use I will go over once I go over aerial combat and wounds, because the combo requires all 3. Lastly, let's talk about our offset attack. I didn't even know this existed for the Kinsect Glaive until I accidentally pulled it off during a hunt. This one is very tricky to pull off, but with enough practice and mastery of the weapon, I'm sure you guys will get it down in no time. This one requires us to have the red extract so we can do our fully charged descending slash. I'm going to set the training dummy to smash mode with its strongest attack, one that cannot be guarded. Now if I get hit by this move, I will get sent flying back and knocked down. Now begin charging up your descending slash, and once fully charged, you have to time the release of it so that your first swing counters the training dummy's attack, leaving the monster vulnerable to attacks for a few seconds. This can even be done during a fully charged descending thrust while you're airborne. The focus strike can also be used in ground combat, but I'll talk more about that when we get to the wounds section of the guide. Now we can talk about the other mechanic that sets this weapon apart from the others. Now to begin aerial combat, all we have to do first is vault up into the air. We keybinded this to the V key, but otherwise, it's R plus spacebar by default. For controller players, it's right trigger plus A on Xbox, or R2 plus X on PlayStation. Once we are airborne, we have a few options. While unbuffed, we can use our dodge key to air evade in any direction we are pressing down with our movement buttons. We can left click to do our jumping advancing slash, right click to do a regular jumping slash. We can toggle on focus mode and use our focus thrust, or we can hold down our Kinsect reticle and use our Kinsect Fire on the monster. If we use left click and manage to land our jumping advancing slash on the monster, we can follow up with more left clicks and continuously repeat jumping advancing slash until our stamina runs out or until we've successfully landed 4 in a row. Each successful hit of jumping advancing slash also refreshes your mid-air evade, so if needed, you can reposition yourself for the next jumping advancing slash or just air dodge out of harm's way. Now when we have red buff, we can hold down our right click while we are airborne in order to execute a charged descending thrust. You can even hold it down while doing multiple jumping advancing slashes and just let go of the button when you're ready to thrust down onto the monster. Now with all 3 buffs, our damage significantly increases. We now get access to strong jumping advancing slash and strong jumping slash. The buttons are the same as when we are unbuffed, however, there are much more slashes now when doing these attacks, which means more damage for us. You can still only do a max of 4 jumping advancing slashes though. and if your focus mode is toggled on, right-clicking after a fully charged strong descending thrust will execute the rising spiral slash. We can now go over wounds. Repeatedly attacking the same area on a monster will eventually add a wound to the monster. Attacking the wound does more damage to the monster, but also gets rid of the wound if you deal too much damage to it. I believe these wounds can open back up, and as a Glaive player, we want to create as many wounds as possible on the monster in order to constantly keep our buffs active. I mentioned earlier that the easiest way for us to get extracts is by using our focus strike on a wound. To do this, bring up the focus mode and press the R key we set up earlier. Shift by default, right bumper on Xbox or R1 on PlayStation. Some of the fastest hunts happen thanks to all the wounds I would set up on the monster. I could constantly hit the monster with rising spiral slashes and immediately get my buffs back. Now here's the last reason why toggle focus mode also makes this easier for us. When our focus mode is toggled on, we only have to right click to do our rising spiral slash, and while we are airborne, focus mode is still toggled on, so we can just press one button again to use the focus thrust and get our buffs back immediately. You'll see more of this during the example hunt at the end of the video. Now that we've gone over all the combat, let me show you the strong combo that I use. With all 3 extracts, you're going to begin the strong slash combo, the one that is 3 left clicks into a right click. But as soon as you begin the combo, you start holding down the right click in order to begin charging your strong descending slash. Execute the first 3 left clicks of the combo and follow up with a strong descending slash by letting go of the right click you were charging up. Next, you should be able to do a rising spiral slash, and then once airborne, aim at the wound and use your focus thrust to get all your extracts back. There are times where a wound is on the other side of a monster, but you get one free mid-air evade you can use after a rising spiral slash in order to get closer to the wound and use descending thrust. This combo does some nice damage and keeps you buffed up in order to get back into the fight and create more wounds. I only really execute this when I know there are more wounds I can proc right after the combo. Finally, we've reached the last section of the guide before the example hunt. Since we are airborne a lot of the time, the chances of us mounting the monster are pretty high compared to other weapon users. When I begin a fight with a monster, my first priority is to get all my 3 buffs active and then try to mount the monster. Mounting the monster allows us to create some wounds early on in the fight. When you land on a monster, you can left click for a light attack, right click for a heavy attack. Then you can use a weapon finisher as well with the R key, right bumper on Xbox or R1 on PlayStation. I normally mash the right click on a spot until I get a wound. If you see the edges of your screen begin to have some weird effect, use your movement buttons to switch to another body part of the monster so you don't lose a lot of your stamina and get knocked off. There is a button you can use to brace yourself and just take the hit and lose less stamina, but why do that when you can be damaging another part of the body and creating more wounds? Large monsters have 3 spots you can move between while small monsters have 2. Try and get as many wounds as possible, and this will get us a good head start to the hunt if we manage to mount at the beginning of the fight. Eventually the monster you fight might run off and go find somewhere to sleep. When this happens, you want to place your strongest barrel bomb next to the sleeping monster and hit it with your strongest attack. I believe the first hit that wakes up the monster does increase damage, so blowing up a barrel in its face to wake it up should do some good damage. I didn't use this a lot during my playthrough, but I figured it would still be useful to have a section going through the wake up attacks. Now, if you're playing with friends who have harder hitting weapons like the hammer or the greatsword, let them do the wake up attack. Otherwise, for us, just hitting it with a leaping slash is enough. That's the forward plus right click. If you have red buff, do a fully charged descending slash, but distance yourself properly so that the last hit of the attack is the one that hits the barrel. At the start of a hunt, if the monster hasn't noticed us yet, we can sneak up behind it and execute a sneak attack. In order to sneak attack a monster, get close to it while it hasn't noticed you, and press the sneak attack button that you are prompted to do. For us on keyboard, it's the F key. I believe your weapon has to be sheathed in order to get this prompt to show up. We also have a simultaneous action called our Dismounting attack used when we are on our mount. Pressing both left click and right click at the same time allows us to vault off our sacred and immediately attack our target. I don't use this often, but I know there's a chance you can mount the monster with this move. Alright guys, you made it to the end of the guide. Feel free to stick around to see an example of me doing a hunt using everything I taught you all. Otherwise, leave me feedback on this in-depth guide of mine. I worked really hard on it and I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. Let me know if I missed anything or if I made any mistakes. If this goes well, I do plan on making more short guides as well as in-depth guides for other weapons on mouse and keyboard. Do you guys like having everything condensed into one video, or would you rather I make shorter videos on different topics of a weapon? You guys gave me the motivation to make this guide, and I want to keep hearing from you. I'd appreciate a like, comment, and a subscribe if you could. I also live stream this game when I can, so I'd love if you guys could follow my Twitch as well. Help me learn the weapons, or maybe even stop by to learn something new. Thank you guys and enjoy the rest of the video. Alright guys, here's the example hunt. It goes a little sloppy at the beginning, but it ends up getting way better. I figured I'd not edit out all the parts where I messed up because I want to show that I'm not perfect. We're all learning the game, trying to get better, and yeah, enjoy the hunt. The first thing I try to do is to gather all 3 of my buffs, but as you can see, I'm kind of failing here. I start getting my butt whooped here, but in the end I end up getting that last buff that I need. Once I get it, my next priority is to vault upwards and land on the monster. Once I'm on the monster, I start spamming my right click so that I can inflict a wound on the monster. I keep moving back and forth to make sure I don't get shaken off. And eventually I do manage to get a wound. And now I'm trying to get a second wound as well on the main body. Once that's done, I use my R key to execute a weapon finisher. And now my next goal with monsters like this is to chop off the tail. So you can see me start focusing the tail with all my attacks. Here you can see I toggle on my focus mode and begin to lash out at the enemy just so I can regain my buffs. I normally do fight a majority of my fights with the focus mode toggled on, just so I can have easy access to the rising slash. Here I roll into his fireball like a doofus. Don't do that. Just keep rolling to stop the burning. Here I make a mistake because I thought I could execute a rising spiral slash, but I didn't realize my focus mode had been toggled off. I quickly toggle it back on and prepare to execute another rising slash, but he roars and cancels it, and I still lose all my buffs. Luckily, there was enough wounds on him for me to just get all my buffs back and continue the onslaught. Now after this rising slash, while I'm in focus mode, I can see that there's a lot of wounds on this monster already, and that just boosts my confidence in this fight because I know I can just start spamming rising spiral slash on him. Here the roar cancels my midair evade, but luckily, because we have all 3 buffs, we're not stunned as long. I think here I get a pretty good dodge on that fireball. I knew it was going to hit me and I didn't have any more midair evades to use, but luckily your left click, the strong jumping advancing slash, kept me in the air a little bit longer and I was able to avoid the attack and mount the monster. And then my priority again when I'm mounted is to create as many wounds as possible. I don't just make one and immediately rush to the finishing attack. After this, I see that on the minimap there's a skull icon near my target, so I know that it's ready to be captured. So I place down a trap and put the 2 trank bombs in its face, and we've captured the monster and completed our hunt. Alright guys, that's it for this example hunt. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we all learned something. Thank you for watching the whole video, guys. Take care.